out with really kind of recapping, what do you do? And that sounds pretty bad coming from me because I'm on the board, so I should know what you're doing, but I'm asking on behalf of the, because everyone, I don't think everyone knows how the company has evolved over all these years. You've morphed into a lot of different things and evolved. Everybody I see out there, every company I see that has you up in the, usually on their deck as a competitor, so you must be doing something right. It's usually up in the right-hand corner, with their company being obviously further in the upper right-hand corner than yours. But so talk about what you do, what you don't do, how the company's evolved, and you know, in 10 words or less.
Okay, I'm not good at 10 words or less, but I'll try to be relatively concise. First of all, it's nice to be back here. It's been fun over the years to participate in this summit. I found it to be a great source of information. I appreciated hearing some of the other presentations, and it's great to be back here in Boston. And as you alluded, we have some wonderful ties to Boston. We're Salt Lake City based as a company. Our founders came from Intermountain Healthcare, but one of our earliest clients was Partners Healthcare, now Mass General Brigham, and also an early investor. And Todd, you and your firm have been a great support and board presence and investor and partner. So Health Catalyst has been around for about 11 years. We do 3 things, and they are fairly broad, and that's one of the reasons why perhaps we end up, we try to think about it as a great potential partner to a lot of other companies, rather than seeing a lot of competitive overlap. There are some companies where we're more direct competitors, but the first thing that we try to always start with our clients is data, the data platform. We've built and invested in a data platform that is designed to make it easy for clients, primarily provider clients, to organize data from hundreds of different sources. So think every major EMR, every major supply chain, costing, finance, patient experience, labs, admin, you name it, we've probably worked with it. And we've invested heavily in R&D dollars, and I appreciated the last speaker and agree very much with this need for greater R&D investment across the country, and certainly in Utah, that's been a huge benefit to us. We're one of those flyover states, so I certainly understand the wave of the last election, and we're excited to see Utah become a little bit more of a tech hub. But we also have a Boston office and offices in the Bay Area and Seattle and elsewhere as well. So the first part is that data platform that organizes data from hundreds of different sources, automates that process so that our health system clients can get a single source of truth stood up in a matter of weeks or months rather than years. And that leads to the second thing that we try to do to help our clients use their data platform. So we do think of that data platform as theirs, not ours, and the underlying data as our health system clients and the patients that they serve. But we play a useful stewardship role as well, is then secondly to analyze the data, clinically, financially, and operationally, to understand where there are opportunities for improvement. And then third, we bring specific services expertise when a client identifies a clinical problem, which could be we need to improve our sepsis mortality rate, or a financial problem like we need to improve our cost per case, or an operational problem like we need to improve the throughput of our emergency department. Then we bring those experts on the services side to work alongside with our clients to actually execute against projects to improve. And that, in essence, is what we do over and over, hundreds or even thousands of times over the course of client relationships that often last, hopefully, decades into the future, because it's hard to change. It's hard to use data and analytics to improve. And there are not 1 or 2 or 3 things that need to change. In healthcare, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of things that need to change clinically, financially, and operationally. And again, because we work across all of those areas, we end up bumping into a number of other companies or potentially partnering with a number of other companies to help our clients succeed in any particular area. And we try to work well with others, play well with others in this space. We recognize, this is a $1 trillion a year problem, the problem of inefficiency, ineffectiveness in how healthcare is delivered, and it's way bigger than any one company can fix. And so we try to be a good partner to other companies and other health systems along the way. But those are the three things that we do.
And what are have been the biggest drivers? Is it the fact that hospitals are increasing under cost pressure and they've got to find ways to, they never really had data before meaningful use. They had paper records mostly. And, they never really had, let's call it performance management systems like every other industry. So, how do you drive a hospital today, and what are the challenges your customers are facing, and what are the drivers that are making you crack that code of the 4-year sales cycle?
Yeah, it's fun to sell to providers, isn't it? I think many in this room know that. It is a challenge to work in the provider space, and yet, at the same time, I think it's an incredible moment for the healthcare delivery ecosystem because of what you just shared, Todd, which is healthcare on the provider side is one of the last industries on the planet to move from paper to digitized format. And the opportunities that unlocks are very, very significant. And so now, as these health systems face the cost pressures that they are facing, they have more than just the sort of the peanut butter cuts that typically happen, where you just cut every department by 5% or 8%, depending on what the Medicare cuts or Medicaid cuts are coming to you. If you're the CFO, now you can actually use data to understand where there are inefficiencies, and you can be more surgical, more specific. But you've got to have the ability to organize that digital data, analyze that digital data, and then do something about it. And that's a new set of skills for a $3.5 trillion U.S.-only industry. And so part of what we have learned over time, and part of the reason we added the services expertise, which has become a meaningful part of our business, is the recognition that this is new. And there is a dearth of analytics expertise in the healthcare ecosystem, a dearth of knowledge because the whole industry has been largely paper-based for so long, of knowing how to use that digital data, knowing how to analyze it, and then knowing how to execute well against projects to improve.
So, 7 digital health IPOs this year already, of which you guys were one, and I would venture to say that Health Catalyst probably, because the data is now available, has been available since you started the company, but had we not had the wave of meaningful use, some of the proliferation of the electronic medical record kind of forging the way, you might not even exist today.
Yeah.
So you went public. There's 7 digital health this year. I can remember, since I've been a long time in this business, the most there ever was before is maybe 1 or 2, and many years 0. The 25 plus companies that are currently filing, looking at filing, silent confidential filing, doing bake-offs with bankers. It's extraordinary. I've never seen that before, but and even if they don't all get out, the fact we have that many companies of scale with that kind of revenue approaching $100 million, et cetera, is amazing. So you guys pulled the trigger in July. Why'd you do it? Do you like pain? Tell us about that journey. What was it all like, and how did it compare to what you thought it was going to be like, and paint that picture for us, please.
Sure, absolutely. I do think it's an exciting time for the industry. And as you mentioned, we went a number of years without any digital health IPOs. And so 2019 has been, I think, a really significant year for the industry. And I believe it's tied to that wave of the opportunities that get unlocked when an entire industry goes from paper to digital. And we're certainly one of those companies that, as you said, wouldn't exist if the industry hadn't gone in that direction. And I think there are many other really good, solid companies that are going to help transform the industry that we're excited and cheering them on. Certainly that's the way that we look at the others of the digital health companies that have gone public. We're excited to see their success, and we hope that success continues. So for us, we've tried to be very mission-oriented from the beginning and very team member-centric from the beginning as well. And as we thought about how do we keep the mission at the center and team member engagement at the center, it felt very much like a compelling path forward would be for Health Catalyst to stay independent as a company. And that independent path for us included the need to prepare to be a public company. Most independent companies at scale become publicly traded companies. It allows you to access capital, allows you to grow in meaningful ways and retain your independence in a compelling fashion. It's also positive for early investors. It's positive for team members who can realize that liquidity and the benefits of ownership. And so for a number of years, as you know, because you've been a long-standing board member, we practiced as if we were a public company. And we watched certain specific size, scale, and predictability thresholds for our business before we felt like we would be ready to be a really successful, long-term, publicly traded company. And I think we try to be good learners at Health Catalyst. So one of our cultural attributes is humility, and we emphasize that partly because we believe in the importance of being great listeners and great learners. And we try to do that as part of the IPO process and becoming a public company. And we learned from other successful public companies that size, scale, and predictability mattered a lot. The practice of being a public company, the cadence of being a public company, understanding how to set expectations, how to set and make and then keep commitments was very fundamentally important to us. And so we spent a couple of years practicing. We spent a few years as a board watching those size, scale, and predictability thresholds. And that's really what guided us as to when we felt like we were ready. And while there is some pain associated with being a public company, I spent 10 years of my career at public tech companies before Health Catalyst, so I knew some of what we were headed towards. There are also many positives, and I would view the time since going public as largely a very positive time that has enabled us to keep the focus on the mission, to stay on an independent path, and to keep the focus on the team members as well. So I'd do it again for sure.
I notice you haven't looked at the stock price since we've been here. That's unusual.
That's hard. And that is one thing with team members that we had to spend a lot of time on. That one of the big challenges, as you may all imagine, of being a publicly traded company is the mood of the team members based on meaningful fluctuations in the stock price that often happen for lots of companies for reasons completely outside of the core performance of the business. And so part of what we've needed to do is reinforce over and over again we have all team member meetings every 2 weeks, and we've talked a lot about how it's important for us to just keep the focus on the long term and not check that stock price 12 times a day, and not over or under respond to those near-term fluctuations. That if we can execute well against what we've learned from those best practice public companies over long periods of time, that the stock price will take care of itself.
You've built what I've noticed being involved with a lot of companies, an extraordinary culture, and you've kept people on the mission. And how do you scale that? I mean, it was ingrained in the company when it was, 30 people, and now how many employees?
We're approaching 900 now.
900. So how do you scale both the culture and the mission?
Well, you've had a front row seat, so you've seen It's really hard. It's really hard. It's so fundamentally different. I got involved with the company when it was the 2 co-founders and 1 employee. And when we wanted to talk about mission and culture, we just got together and we were all in the same room, and we almost just lived it without being real intentional. As we got to 30 and then 100 and then 200, I think it became more and more clear that we needed to be very much more deliberate in building culture right into the fabric of the company. And it's something that keeps me up at night. It's something that you never complete. And in many ways, I think it's very hard to scale culture. I view the team member engagement and the team member experience as my number 1 priority, that every day I should be working on improving that. And we've done a few things that I think have helped us build culture right into the fabric of the organization. So we try to think about, how do we reinforce that our mission, our operating principles, and our cultural attributes are more than just words on a page? And so we've adopted practices. Like, one of our operating principles is transparency. So that sounds good, and a lot of companies talk about being honest and transparent. But how do you put it into practice, especially when it's hard? So one example for us was, we wanted team members to feel like we could talk together about the tough issues that we might be facing. So a number of years ago, we started a practice where every 2 weeks, when we have an all-team member meeting, we have a standing agenda item where we all go out to the Glassdoor website together on the all-team member meeting, and we read the reviews that have come in over the last 2 weeks. And I personally respond to every review, including the really tough ones, right? And there are plenty of really tough ones. Glassdoor's great that way, right? There's no filter. There's no way for companies to filter the reviews. And I actually found it to be an incredible opportunity to try to reinforce that we're going to live the operating principle of transparency, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when, a really tough issue comes up that we might want to shy away from. Instead, let's shine a light on it, and let's exercise humility and not get defensive about the feedback that we receive, but rather have an openness to learning from the feedback and sifting through that feedback to find golden nuggets that can help us to improve. So that's one example that takes time and effort and energy. And sometimes I'm reaching for a brown paper bag to breathe through when I read some of the...
Or put over your head.
Yeah. When I read some of the feedback. Another practice that we implemented many years ago was, every 6 months, we used the Gallup organization to survey our team members and understand what their level of engagement and satisfaction is in the company. And they provide quantitative responses and qualitative responses to Gallup's standard survey forms. And we as a leadership team have committed for many years that we will read every qualitative comment. And then we share the quantitative and qualitative results every 6 months in one of those all-team member meetings, transparently, especially when there are themes that need to be addressed, where we need to improve, we need to get better. And that's happened hundreds of times. And we take action as a leadership team to make changes based on that team member feedback. And every people manager's bonus is tied to our team members' engagement scores. And that, I think, has helped us keep the focus on the right things, on engagement, on culture, on mission, build right into the fabric on a consistent basis, that reinforcement. And I think it's helped us insofar as we've had success to keep scaling the culture. But you're never done. It's really hard. And if we don't work hard on it today, we'll be falling behind.
Great. You've got a public company now. You've got a currency. You've got some cash. Stock's up 50% over the IPO price, doing well. Very volatile, as all these as the analysts are trying to figure out. Are you really beating and raising? Are you sandbagging? Are you going to keep doing it? All that kind of phase that you're in right now. But you got to grow, and you can't just keep growing, and you've done some acquisitions in the past. You've made a lot of build versus buy decisions. How do you make those decisions? What are you thinking about? And you could actually, let's segue that into what kind of trends, what kind of areas are you going to be investing in the future, facing the challenges you see out there in the healthcare system and the opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So I think every company has to choose carefully its strategy in lots of different areas, but certainly specific to build versus partner versus buy. And I respect companies choosing different strategies. Epic is a good example of a company that's chosen a strategy where they really don't pursue inorganic acquisitions. And I respect that strategy. There's upside to that strategy. We've tried to, again, study others, and I will say I've studied the data on M&A, and it's challenging, right? There's lots more examples of M&A not working out than there are of M&A working out. So we try to be careful and disciplined at Health Catalyst when we think about M&A. But as I mentioned before, we also recognize that we're not the only company that is developing and commercializing interesting innovations. And so if I go back to the three things that we do, at the data platform layer, we have a strategic perspective that data platform is probably best built, not bought. And we see examples of companies trying to cobble together a data platform through M&A, and we see lots of flaws in that strategy. So I don't think we're real likely, and there are very few organizations that actually compete at the data platform layer, partly because it requires an incredible amount of investment, and it's ongoing investment. We've spent over $100 million building out that data platform and maintaining all those source connectors. It's an incredible headache, and that's part of our value proposition is we take the headaches away from a lot of our health systems. So at the data platform layer, I think we will continue to primarily invest in building our own capabilities there. At the apps layer, the second category, this is an area where when we look at the landscape, we see over 1,000 companies out there. And we see a lot of interesting innovation across clinical, financial, and operational areas. And we've chosen 7 or 8 areas where we've built out specific capabilities, but we've also benefited from acquiring capabilities in some specific places. And as a result, I think we are excited about the possibility of the buy option or the partner option, where we want to enable an ecosystem that needs data, that's been organized in the data platform setting, that when those application layer innovators have access to that data, they can do great things, and they can go to market faster with the benefit of that data platform than they could otherwise. So we want to enable many partnerships. We also are excited about the M&A possibilities at the apps layer in those clinical, financial, and operational areas. And I think what we've tried to do is we work with around 120 health system clients now that serve over 100 million patients. And so we have the benefit across all of those client relationships of understanding a lot of data. 10 to 100 terabytes of data per client is very common for us to be dealing with. That allows us to recognize patterns in areas where there are clinical, financial, or operational, consistent opportunities for improvement. And that's why we've prioritized the 7 or 8 categories that we have. But it's also helped us identify categories in areas where we don't have a solution today, where we hear clients asking about and needing help, and where I think we would be excited about pursuing, the potential of M&A in the future. So we have an active process where, and our head of corporate development, Kyle Salyers, we joke that he drinks lighter fluid for breakfast. He has an amazing energy level, and he is in conversations with typically around 200 of those 1,000 or so app companies at any given moment. And I think we believe there will be meaningful opportunities to welcome some of those companies into the Health Catalyst family in the months and years ahead.
So you're, as CEO of a public company, you're probably more outward facing now and being the public face of the company, and you're talking to not only investors, but you're talking to a lot of clients and listening to their challenges and seeing what the opportunities are. So what are some of the areas of innovation that investors should be looking at going forward, and that are pain points that you see the customers need to have solved?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we talked about the digitization of healthcare just being a huge wave that will produce thousands of opportunities, I believe, for improvement, innovation, improved effectiveness, improved efficiency. And it also enables really whiz-bang, cool, shiny object type stuff. And I'll share a mistake that we made at Health Catalyst, which I believe could be a mistake that a lot of startups could make. And I'll reference some conversations with CFO, COO, CEO of client health systems, where they've given us the feedback that many years ago we co-authored with HIMSS something referred to as the analytics adoption model. So it's similar to the EMR adoption model that HIMSS produced, and kind of helped many health systems walk through, how do I go from being paper-based to being electronic as it relates to medical records. So we thought the entire healthcare ecosystem needs to kind of go through that same maturation as it relates to data and analytics more broadly. And so we came with a level 0 all the way through level 9. And if any of you are Kung Fu Panda movie buffs, I love the line, there is now a level 0, right? There's definitely a level 0 in healthcare. And levels 0 through 4 in that analytics maturity model are really not sexy, and they're not headline grabbing. They are meat and potatoes kinds of like blocking and tackling issues of, wow, data is in all these different sources, and mostly it's in Excel or Access spread marts and crazy, there's no data governance, there's no infrastructure in place. And we just got to crank out these reports that, submit to these registries, and it's all manual. And like level 0 through 4 is not exciting, and no one really wants to talk about or do it, but there's an incredible amount of work and an amazing amount of inefficiency that exists at those lower levels. And the mistake I think that we made, and that maybe a lot of startups might be tempted to make, and investors might be tempted to help those startups make this mistake, would be to jump up to levels 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, where all this cool AI and incredible machine learning, look how we can predict this using this algorithm, which is it's not wrong. It's just from the perspective of impacting the industry. If you skip the foundational levels and go all the way up to 6, 7, 8, 9, without that foundation in place, nothing scales. It's just science projects up at level 7, 8, 9. And we've done so many science projects over the last 11 years up at those high levels that in our most recent user group this last fall, we do try to exercise humility, so we always ask a lot of questions when our customers get together in user group settings. And then we analyze the data, and it was striking. This was year 11 of our company's existence, that the overwhelming feedback, and this is from C-suite all the way down to boots on the ground at our clients, they want help in levels 0 through 4, mostly. And so part of what we've had to do over the years is shift and say, okay, we get it. We're going to help you. We're going to get deeply involved in levels 0 through 4, which is a bunch of plumbing, and it's tough, roll up your sleeves work. It's tech and it's services. And we're going to solve those foundational problems so that when we do work at levels 5 through 9, it could actually scale and have impact, and we could roll it out across the system, not just in a science project. So if I were an investor, understanding companies that can help with some of the more basic, less sexy elements of helping the industry transform, I think will be big markets, big needs, significant opportunities that we're certainly focused on.
I want to offer up a question here, but first of all, you're making a foray into pharma. Pharma really needs your data. You know, we saw our friend Nat Turner sell his company Flatiron to Roche Genentech for $2 billion, mostly based on oncology data and mostly coming from the EMR. I've heard people say your data is much richer than that and much broader, but you've got to work with pharma. How do you do that without compromising the needs and wishes of your health systems, who actually could benefit from some of that work? So how do you make that bond and that relationship work?
Yeah, so we view that as a pretty tricky scenario, and one we didn't want to rush into. And so I'll go back to something I mentioned before. We fundamentally don't view the data as ours. So that's an important starting point. We view the data as really our health system clients and or the patients that they serve. It's their data. And starting from that paradigm, starting from that vantage point, it changes the way that we need to approach the situation. We're much more of a facilitator and a steward then. When we think about how we could play a role with our health system clients in enabling improvement, measurable improvement, which is the core of our mission, that could involve life sciences as well. But it's with a paradigm that it's not our data, number one, and number two, it's always in partnership with our health system clients, which means it takes longer to build a business in that way, but we believe it'll be a more sustainable long-term business, and it's focused just on specific use cases where we can drive towards measurable improvement, which is consistent with the mission, and it's one where we do it in partnership with the clients. So that'll take years to develop, but it is something when you think about the richness of the data set, because we do tough clinical improvement work, and we have from the beginning. That's required us to gather data that's very clinically deep. And as a result, across the 100 million plus patients that we have a stewardship responsibility for across our clients, we have 80 to 100,000 facts per patient, and most of those are clinically rich. And so I think the opportunity to use that data to measurably improve with life sciences companies and in partnership with health systems will be significant over the next several years. And it will lead towards lives saved, injuries prevented, all of the metrics that we already track with our health system clients, but it needs to be done carefully. So we're taking it one step at a time there.